You're dialed in to Byron Velvick's Fish Tales. Real talk, real tactics, and the stories that make it all worthwhile. Byron Velvick's Fish Tales is brought to you by Livingston Lures, Trika Fishing, Mercury Outboards, and Camus Boats. Without further ado, here's Byron.
Welcome to Byron Velvick's Fish Tales. I'm so excited. It's the Byron Velvick Fish Tale podcast, and this is big news. This is the beginning of the podcast for Livingston Lures and Fish Tales and me, my first podcast ever. And I got the man, the myth, the legend. He needs no introduction. He's been my friend for 30 plus years. Rick, I'm excited because not only is this my first podcast, and yeah, Livingston sponsoring it, but now we have you as part of this amazing team with Livingston.
Yes, you do, and we're looking forward to it. I'm fascinated by it. I'm amazed that Livingston's been around how many years now?
I've been with them 10 years, Rick, and they've been around longer than that. I actually came in a little bit late to the party, but Livingston's been around for, I want to say 12 years or so probably, but it's amazing.
Well, I first became aware of them when Randy won the Classic, Randy Howell won the Classic, at Guntersville, fishing my favorite pattern. I won the Classic in 1976 on Lake Guntersville, and I was fishing riprap, and I caught my 5 biggest out on some weed beds in the mouth of Browns Creek, but all the rest of my fish came off riprap, just like Randy was fishing. And then I think Hank Cherry won his Classic off the riprap there. So it's really played a huge role for a long, long time. It's no secret anymore. But but what really I also came aware of was the Livingston lures at that time. And I paid a little attention to the EBS, technology they were using. But at the same time, I didn't. I was kind of skeptical, I guess would be the best word, because we all are in fishing. We hear so much stuff over the years, what you should do. But at the same time, I've tried to advance my knowledge and my awareness skills to higher and higher levels. I realized in my early fishing career that so much of your information, it's due to awareness. Well, what is awareness? It's how well you use your sensory abilities, your sight, your sound, your hearing, your touch, your feel, smell, taste, and some others that we don't recognize yet. I know there are other senses besides the ones that are easily recognized. And also, I did, some survival courses. These were top-notch survival courses that a lot of the Army and other special forces units go to learn survival. And the one thing you constantly emphasize is, again, what keeps you alive is your senses.
Right.
And so I really started to study it a lot more. I got to where I was studying the lateral line a lot over 20 years ago and how it functioned, because it was a sense that we really didn't, know a whole lot about. And there was very little being done on it study-wise. There was one lady that was doing the most study on the lateral line and how it was used and how many creatures depend on it. And so
on just a fish's lateral line, or all when you say lateral line, is it all fish?
Hers was just basically fish, and mostly saltwater fish. She was at the University of Hawaii for a while, I think somewhere else in the Midwest before that. But she was really doing some intense study on how it was used and how how fish like a bass could basically, what is it used if it's muddy water or if it's pitch black and can't use sight anymore. It has to still be able to survive, and that's where you pull in the other senses, sound, and the lateral line became a bigger one even than sound itself, what we normally hear if you're having rattles in a bait or something like that. But this EBS system, the electronic bait fish sounds, were more designed to mimic crawfish and other types of bait fish. But you know what? That doesn't fascinate me. It fascinates me, but what really fascinated me was I was watching on one of the National Geographic shows one time, and you saw in the snow this fox in the snow, and he'd stop and just listen, and he'd have his little paws down, and he'd be hunched up in the snow, and all of a sudden he'd take this huge leap into the air and come down into the snow, bury half his body in the snow to catch a mouse. So that was, again, he was using one of his senses to detect probably sun movement from that little mouse that was in the snow. And I've seen them do it. I've seen coyotes do it here on my property in heavy grass. I'll do the same thing, and they're almost listening to something, waiting for it to move. But also, at times, it's not moving. So they may be listening to things as subtle as heartbeats and what other sounds they're using that to strike. And I mean, you're literally even the coyote do exactly the same thing. They go jump way up in the air and they come down into this grass, and they hardly ever miss when they do that. They can't see it. So again, and I know so much of a bass. That's what I know more about than anything. They have to function in real muddy water where they can't see. They have to function, but and then I add another factor to that, and that's the way I predominantly generate strikes. Historically, if you had to say, tell me how you've generated the most strikes from any combination of lures in your whole career, and there's one way. One way I've generated is when I'm moving the bait very fast.
Yeah, okay. And you're known for that. You're one of the fastest fishermen I know. Exactly.
And a lot of it, and the clearer the water, the faster you have to move it, because I'm trying to override sight. Because most of our stuffs are fake. Most of our baits they're getting better and better, more cosmetically appealing and all of that. But the reality is they're still fake.
Right.
And so that was one of the ways I used that, because to overcome that, their use of their sight, but also to overcome, there's things in nature, that when something's trying to get away from it, it's fight or flight.
Right.
And a lot of times it's flight with the prey. And the minute that the predator detects that flight taking place, it generates him a lot of times to strike, because he thinks it's going to get away.
Right.
And but here's the thing that I learned over time. There is another way, and I don't understand this one. And this is where I'm fascinated with the EBS. This one I don't understand is when the bait's not moving. How to generate strikes when it's not moving. And I've some of my biggest catches in my career have been when I've employed no movement. Mm-hmm. And now I've associated a lot with time of the year, cold water, maybe stuff like that. But where you actually get the bait down to a certain depth and then you stop it. And one of the biggest, I think I even drew you at that tournament at Kentucky Lake.
We did draw each other at Kentucky Lake. Yeah.
Where I led that tournament the first day with 32 pounds. And every fish was hit on a dead stop. In fact, it had to be stopped for approximately 8 seconds minimum. 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004. I'd get it down, then I'd stop it. And every bite came 1008 to 1010. And
every bite came after the 8 count.
If
you moved it before 8, you weren't going to get bit.
No, you weren't going to get bit. And so I know then that fascinated me, and it still fascinates me. And this is where I really have started. When I talked to you and Eric, the vice president of Livingston at the Classic this year, it really started, for some reason, it pushed a button. And the modern technology now, when you watch what the fish are doing with this forward-facing, you really start to see a value in knowing the movement and how the fish is reacting, and non-movement, how the fish is reacting. And you see an equal, well, in some cases, maybe even more of a reaction in non-movement. So this again is what I've been really, and I'm a first grader, okay, but I'm learning as fast as I can this effect of the fish being able to, because I know that one of the things for the better forward facing young gentlemen I know that do that, one of the best things they're good at is reading the bass's first reaction to their lure, and when they spotted it. And I say spotted it because they don't know. I don't think they always see it. They feel it in some way or another. Just because they have to use all their senses to their ultimate ability, or they don't die. They're not like us. They're not sitting in this nice protected environmental,
With a kitchen down the way, and
with a
you can go
kitchen,
grab a
yeah,
burger.
yeah, and your big, dogs outside keeping all the bears away and that kind of stuff. So,
Right.
so anyway, so again, it's fascinating to me now. Yes, I'm going to be spending time with Livingston, and that's one of my biggest thing now is to develop in me, and how to fish a bait better when it's not moving. And I think this is definitely it's going to really provoke the senses of a fish and how he uses those when this bait's not necessarily moving.
Yeah, we talked about the hydrowave before. This is literally like a hydrowave built into a fishing lure, and that's where Livingston, came along a long time ago. And we talked about this. I've talked. We've known each other for 30 years, and and it's like we talked before about all those gimmicks come along and they come and go, and these lures show up. But man, this thing actually looks really obvious on a forward-facing sonar screen. You can watch the fish draw to it. I'm watching this. What little I know, like you, about forward-facing sonar, that's to your point, a great information network for us to be able to see those fish even far off, looking at a bait, reacting to it, and you can see the bait better because it's got a microchip in it, it's got a speaker in it, it's got a battery in it, but it's a hydrowave built into a fishing lure. I mean, it's literally a duck collar in a fishing lure, and that's where I was like, Rick, these baits, I mean, they're catching them, and they're catching them really well on them, especially these kids with the forward-facing sonar, because they can see the bait better, and they can watch the fish come up to it. And like they do now, they speed up on it when the fish starts to approach it, so that they can make it look like a fleeing prey and generate strikes. But what a great lure! Like if you had that as a jerk bait and you're throwing it out there when you were leading Kentucky, and you could watch those fish on a count of 7, 8, 9, 10 run up and grab it, that would have been a phenomenal sight, don't you think? Because those were smallmouth.
Jerkbait.
Is
Yeah,
that
that's
it?
the one. That's one
That's
of
the
my.
jerk bait.
They already know that's a very great tool with this new electronics, and there's many, many, many jerkbaits out there, but none of them have the sound system. And then so many of those fish on the jerkbaits you watch out there are moved toward it when it's not moving, or it's minimum movement with the bait. So anything else, and again, I'm not stopping here. I'm going to go out with guys that know how to use that. But then I already see the lure selection expanding with this new electronics. We saw that at Lake Fork when they just started catching them on crankbaits and jerkbaits and other baits. And I've seen some film of yours where you're actually catching them on a topwater.
Yep.
And you're watching the fish come up to the topwater.
Yeah.
So, and again, in topwater, there is another lure that we know. Again, I tend to fish them overly fast, especially with a Rico type popper bait.
Yeah. Yeah.
But at the same time, there's certain times of the year when they do not want it moving. And so it fascinates me that you're basically giving yourself another opportunity for the fish in a non-moving bait to find your lure. I'm studying right now how to find huge schools of sardines that are, miles away.
Mhm.
Okay, they can't see them, but obviously, again, these fish got so many ways of living. They're so connected to their environment that,
They're hearing it or they're sensing it.
they're doing something, and I don't even like to put a name on it because then we're only guessing, because there's so little science about it. There is some, but still there's so little about how's nature really working? We tend to try to narrow it down to a couple of things, but it's a lot more than
Wait,
we think.
when I was filming Going Coastal on ESPN and the outdoor shows, we would go do an inshore fishing down in Panama, and I'm out there with the native people down there in Panama, and they're in the cayugas, which is like a makeshift saltwater canoe, the cayuga, and they're banging the side of these canoes of theirs, and they're drawing fish, inshore fish, to the canoe, and and again, sound traveling through water so much better. They, sight and everything else, but sound it carries very far in the water. Jump in the water, you can hear a boat running way far away. You can hear that prop. You can hear that sound. Put your head underwater, you're like, there's a boat coming before you almost see it sometimes. You can hear the whirring underwater. Well, these guys are knocking the side of their saltwater canoes and drawing fish up, and they do that. That's how they catch their fish, is they actually draw attention to themselves and get the fish to get close to their little canoes. And again, I think that's where Livingston has something special here, and I'm glad you're going to be a part of the team, because the bait has been performing incredibly, and now these kids are throwing glide baits, and our glide bait has all that sound technology. But the other day I was out with this high school champion, and he said, "Man, I wish you guys made a jerk bait," because he didn't know the product line. He goes, "It'd be cool if you guys could get this technology down to the size of a jerk bait." And I reached in the box and pulled out one of our jerk baits, and he's like, "Oh my gosh!" He goes, "I can't believe that's all in there." Holds it up to the light, and he can see all the technology, and he goes, "Can I throw it? I just want to see what it looks like on live scope," because he was a live scope kid. And to your point, these kids are so good at it, but he goes, "Oh, with the signal on it, 70, 80, 90 foot out, twitch that thing down, and you can see it like a Christmas tree light sitting out there."
Yeah, that's again, I think whether it's by science or just good fortune, I think Livingston's the way this little baits put together. I'm talking about the EBS part of it. It just naturally has a level of sending a signal back through that forward facing that just is as good as any bait that I've seen. So no, this is just the beginning of it. As far as I'm concerned, I think. Of course, my favorite baits are square
The
bills
crankbaits.
and square bills, and this is a Livingston. And that's the other thing that I've noticed. They had me come down to San Antonio, Texas, and they had all their baits that they manufactured on the wall behind Eric and you, and I was impressed with the quality of the baits. Okay, because all the baits. Let's use the square bill as an example. I designed the very first hard plastic square bills that worked. Okay, and still they're probably the best that was ever made. It's a 3.5, 2.5, and 1.5. And this pretty much is a copy, which everybody copies something that's good out there. It's just the nature of our sport. And so when I look at all this, and I was impressed with the line of lures that they had and the quality of them and the way they looked and cosmetics. I look at a bait function first, presentation first. How hard is that bait going to be present to where you want it to be presented to in the water? Second is, how's it going to work once it's in the water? And third, is then cosmetics and all the pretty stuff that we call sexy. So,
Right.
but that's kind of the last consideration. And I looked at it and I said, this is an incredible line of baits. And I'm talking to myself. And then it hits me, there's about XYZ, 3 other companies that make just as good quality of bait. Now, you can nitpick them all apart if you want, but the differences are so small. But then it hit me. There is a big difference. Even though this bait is as good as any of them I've seen out there, there is a difference. So, and that's what a fisherman are looking for. We're looking for a reason why to buy that one over that one and that one and that one when you go in a Bass Pro Shop store or something like that. And they look, especially the Japanese baits, the cosmetics are just unreal. So, but this one has this really added system in it that like you just pointed out, you can see pretty darn good. Even better, I can see better than I can see other baits out there 40, 50 feet away. But and also it has this sensory thing that we know plays a giant role in nature, the senses. You know, one of the things I always talk to college kids about is, do they believe in zombies? And of course they look at me like I really didn't come here to hear about zombies. I want to hear about fishing. And yet the reality is humans, we're just different degrees of zombies, because we do not use, what makes you not a zombie is how well you're utilizing your senses. And we can get away with not utilizing them so well. But in nature, the bass, the fish, they cannot, or they don't live very long. They don't survive. So I'm just saying, you know, we better be understanding how they use their senses and be taking advantage of that as much as we can.
You know, and you're a hard bait fisherman. What's exciting when I was talking to Livingston about the opportunity to work with you is I've been using the baits for a long time. I've seen them, and different than you. Like I fished with you before. We've practiced together. We drew each other in a couple tournaments. Another long story there, but we had a lot of fun. And I noticed I fish a lot slower than you. Like you fish a topwater real fast. I'm one of those guys that marinates a bait, and so the Livingston baits are something that I'm throwing slow. I'm letting it pause. I throw it out there. I let the rings dissipate. And a lot of times with Livingston, you see so many strikes coming, to your point, on the pause. You know, you'll be twitching that top water over by a grass bed. You freeze it on the grass point where you think there should be a bite, and then that bait does something unlike any other bait, which is it starts giving off that electronic baitfish, distressed baitfish sound. Now I got a little hydro wave sitting out there on the tip
Explain
of the
how that
point.
works, Byron. You know better than I do. It has to be water activated, right?
Yeah, it hits the water. Every single Livingston bait has a little diodes on it. So when it hits the water, it still only gives off sound when it's wet. And everybody says, well, how long does the battery last? And it's around 300 wet hours. You know, that's one of those things where you're like, you're not going to have a bait in the water 300 hours. You still
No,
got a
not
great
until
looking bait.
you lose it in a cypress tree stump.
And it sits there for 300 hours in a cypress tree stump. But it has 300 watt hours, and it's giving off that electronic baitfish sound. And what Livingston did was they matched it. They matched it to each of the baits. So if it's a crawfish pattern, it gives off a crawfish sound. If it's we have a frog. If it's a frog, the frog gives off a frog electronic sound that we've identified that sounds a lot like a frog or a crawfish or a shad or a herring. And there's little subtle differences, and that's where it's way beyond my scope of knowing, because I'm just a fisherman like you. I'm a guy that loves the baits. I've caught a ton of fish, a ton of fish on all the different models, and I've learned a lot about them. But these guys back at the R&D place, they've taken and they've matched the hatch so that there is a sound that is specifically close to a frog or a crawfish or a shad or a herring, and they mimic that. So it is a different bit of a sound for each body type and for each whatever crustacean or whatever baitfish that they're trying to appeal to. And that's what Livingston has done. And so, I was like, gosh, when we can get a hard bait master, a guy that's, you're known for jerk baits, you're known for crankbaits, you're known for topwater. And, I know one thing about you, Rick. You would never sign on if you didn't believe in it. I'm like, this is the thing that, Rick, I'm going to introduce you to these baits. If you don't like them, Rick and I are friends. You're going to say, Byron, we're great friends, but it's just not a match, because I know you wouldn't just endorse or be a part of a team just because they want to sign you. And I was like, this is one of those deals where Rick's going to check these baits out. Let's hope he gets back in touch with us. And this is where I got real excited, is that you did.
No, and it's, of course, I love moving baits, but I have had enough experience with non-moving baits to know it. I wish I had another 25, 30 years to master that, a technique, as well as I have with fast-moving baits, with non-moving baits. And I think this is an essential element in that, because even when this bait is not moving, it's attracting a potential predator. And predators are, that's what, I love watching them. Even we were here recently down in Louisiana, and you just watch what an alligator does. I mean, his senses about the bait in the water, and I know he has to understand and feel and see. He's using every sense to his highest ability, and the bass and the fish are doing the same thing. And I just really am excited about getting in the boat where I can actually see what's happening. And we really hadn't had that ability until recently.
Are you there? I think I just had a pause. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, but you're kind of
I don't know
cutting
why we're
over me.
breaking up all
You
of a sudden.
become a zombie.
Can you hear me?
So yeah,
Hello?
no, no, you
Hello?
you have stopped moving.
Uh-oh, we're
There,
frozen.
you're back. You're back.
Okay, I don't know if that was a glitch. I know you have some bad weather where you're at. Maybe that's power related. Your lights are still on.
It's past us, but you can't tell here in the Ozarks.
Yeah. Well, thanks for. I mean, I know it's been hard to pull this off because I talked to Melissa and you today about the weather. So I'm excited about you being involved. I also want to talk about some of the future podcasts we're going to do because, like, I want to do a series with my dear friend, mentor, the guy that. Really, you've been an instrumental part of my fishing, Rick, and in the mind of the master, I think might be the series that we might be doing together with the podcast thing and talking about techniques and fishing and stories, great stories from our past. And I think a lot of people would be interested in just in, I remember, I think I told you this. I remember a time where we sat in a houseboat with a friend of mine. He watched us talking back and forth about those stories, and he was blown away at the end of the evening. Melissa made us a great dinner. We're practicing for the US Open. And it's like these are those moments where we just get to talk to each other. We're having a genuine conversation. We're not texting. We're not talking on a phone. We're not distracted. We're one on one here. And I'm looking forward to more of these, Rick. I think these are a great avenue for people to listen in. My friend was blown away. He wished he had videotaped our conversation the whole evening when we just sat and told stories. And he was sitting there by our side, just enjoying dinner, saying, "This is the best podcast I've ever seen." But it was a live conversation at dinner on a houseboat.
No, no, and it's like I said, there's so much information. I hope in me still, and I know in you. Even if people say, "Well, what about Byron? How can he help you fish?" I wish I had another 25 years, 30 years to learn swim baits because I know how good you are with those. You're one of the very best. And I know you got one that I'm above Eric to death about is that new swim bait that's got a different system of catching the fish, and I want to see that one because that the bigger the bait, we know the harder they are to hook, and that one you have is amazing. So that kind of thing too. It's just not old stories, but it's new stories because I, you know if I couldn't continue to learn, and that's what excites me about this more than anything else and that's what excites me about the technology nowadays. It's giving me a vehicle to learn more and more than I ever have, and quicker than I ever have.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what's exciting about these podcasts is it gives us a chance to sit there and share stories, but also teach people things that we've learned from, 50 years of tournament fishing. I've got 30 years, 80 years of experience in two different boats doing two different things. And I'm thrilled to have you on board, Rick, and I'm thrilled that you're a part of the Livingston team. And now we're going into the ICAST show and all the other shows coming up and a lot of time on the water. You got a bait in your hand? I see something.
Oh yeah, I can't. Again, it's a Livingston square bill, but that's if I had to pick. Well, no, I couldn't pick a square bill. It would be real close. But it is one bait that I never do not have one on the deck. I don't care what time of the year it is, and this one's got this very thin bill, and it would the thinner the bill in a square bill. If you want to know what first thing to look at in any square bill you buy is how thin the bill is. If it's the thicker it is, the more rigid it is, it's not going to have as good a vibration and movement as the one that has the thin bill. And we're coming with a new thin bill too. So anyway, that's a surprise. So.
You're teasing the swim bait. I love it. You're teasing
Yeah,
the swim bait that I'm like, oh, I want to say something, but we can't. So
yeah.
Livingston swim bait coming up and a couple of new bills coming up. And that's the cool thing about this company is that they listen to us. It's like we already came out with the glide baits. And that was me going back into the old True Tungsten days and saying, guys, we need a glide bait that you can change the weight system on. The Vipers and the Venoms are a glide bait, but they're the deepest running glide baits out there. Most of your glide baits, most of the swim bait guys know, those big glide baits, they don't go very deep. They're almost a subsurface or a very slow sinking. But True Tungsten, before they went out of business, created a glide bait where you could pull a pin, you could add weight to it, and you could change the weight of the bait so you could fish different water columns. And I went to Livingston, so they're out of business a long time ago, and I used to be sponsored by True Tungsten. And they went out of business, and I came to Eric and the guys at Livingston, and I brought three baits to them. I brought the Old Man's Georgian Shad, which became the Sprocket, which is this amazing schooling fish bait. Little, has the sound in it, but it's a small little plastic swim bait. And then the Viper and the Venom. And here's the thing, Rick, that's what that kid caught those big ones on when we went out and did a educational swim bait days on the water with me. Because we're putting either the lead balls in there, we're filling it up, or we're adding tungsten to it. You can actually put tungsten in the body of it, and you got a glide bait that's going to go down, 12, 15 foot of water, and you can slow roll it right over the brush piles. You can slow it right over the deep grass. And you got this glide bait that's gliding along out there, giving off all that distressed bait fish sound. But that's where I'm loving Livingston, is that when Rick Clunn comes to the office or gets on there with Eric and says, guys, this is something I see missing in the lineup, or this is something I'd like to add to the lineup. I did that with swim baits, the Sprocket, or called the Slingshot, because we had two different names for it, and the Viper and the Venom. And we're excited now because everything you've known for 50 years, I mean, we want to just be a resource to build the perfect hard baits for you, like they built the best swim baits for me.
No, I'm definitely. We're going to be at ICAST coming up here soon, and it's the first ICAST I've been to in a while, and so. It's again just basically letting the world know that we're going to be working together.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it. Well, I'll see you at ICAST. I appreciate your time tonight. We got a lot more stories to tell. Rick Clunn and I, in the Mind of the Master, will be the series here on the Fishtail podcast. Rick, any closing words before I let you go back to dinner, Melissa, and enjoying that weather?
No, we just can't tell all the stories, okay?
Some stories will not be on the podcast. There's always going to be some edit points, but we won't tell everything, but we got lots of stories to share. So thank you for being part of the, what's that?
I said they're good stories, either way.
They're all good stories. Yeah. Rick, thanks for being on Fish Tales, and thanks for joining Team Livingston with me. I'm glad to have my mentor, my friend, and one of the most important people in my entire life as a team member. And we're going to have a lot of fun, Rick. We really are.
Appreciate it, Byron. See ya.
All right. Bye, everybody. Thank you very much.
Fish Tales has been brought to you by Livingston Lures. Learn more at livingstonlures.com.